Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Therapy, Etc. I have a very special guest here today. We were just talking about how we just met on the internet. So I will let you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Adonica Shaw. I am the founder of a company called Wingwomen. It's actually a health-focused social media platform for professional women.
Mhm.
I'm very passionate about women's health. Honestly, that's everything from mental and emotional health to practical
Mhm.
information around reproductive health and
Ah,
what does it look like to be a mom or a professional woman and kind of balance those things while you're in a position of leadership. So um, that's kind of just where my passion lies. And you guys can find out more about me either there or on my website.
yeah, and I'll definitely link some of those pieces at the end. But we, like I said, we met on the internet, and actually, this is the first time we actually speak. But and it was because of you had this article on Medium regarding PTSD.
Mhm.
So where did that inspiration come from to even start writing on Medium, or even like the topic, which being
Yeah.
we are recording in June. It's mental health or PTSD awareness month. Huge
Mhm.
topic, but a lot of taboo around it, and mental
Yeah.
health in general, right?
It's interesting. And this touches a little bit of why Wing Woman was started and how I ended up starting to write on Medium. I have a very varied background. I actually started as a weather lady. And
Really?
when I came off of TV, I pivoted into PR, marketing, a lot of public speaking because it was still very similar to being on television. When you're
Uh-huh.
used to being able to talk to the public and create stories and narratives. And
Yeah.
you have to figure this is more than 10 years ago. So social media really wasn't being leveraged by anybody business wise at the time, unless, of course, you worked
Mm-hmm.
for a major news organization. So I had all
Mm-hmm.
of these skills, right? And I found myself um, pivoting from TV to marketing PR. Given several TED Talks, run for office. I'd been involved with several
Wow.
nonprofits in a leadership capacity. And I
Uh-huh.
kept running into women who were just like me, like the ceiling breaker, like you're the only woman in the boardroom or in a
Mhm.
certain arena or in a certain opportunity. And then you run into each other and it's like, you've got like, what is it, 2-3 minutes to find out this woman's life story and what is she
Yeah,
up to?
yeah.
Because it's just rare, I think, at a certain point in certain industry types and career fields to find other women that you can just
Mhm.
speak freely. And I started to run into women who were, more like me than not. Like I'd privately been trying to figure out like, oh my God, is this much anxiety normal? Because
I know, right?
I'd have anxiety from doing all of these
Yeah.
great things, but just trying to like, I hate to say mask it because once you're the woman who gets selected to do them, like you don't want to do anything to lose that opportunities. And so I
Right,
started
you
to
have to
run
go
into,
for it.
yeah, I started to run into women who had been facing a number of different health concerns and issues privately, but because of who they
Mhm.
were, I mean, you can't just go around telling people, hey, I need support, I need advice. You don't want that in your
Mhm.
Google search history. And
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
frankly, I'd say until more recently, there hasn't been this real conscious movement by mentors to also touch on the self care, mental health, overall wellness piece as it relates to being a professional woman. It's kind of like, we want you to shatter glass ceilings, we're going to make it happen. But sometimes that health component really gets left out of the conversation. And so, in
Mhm.
an effort to build my platform, I was going around and honestly just tapping people and tagging folks on Instagram and social media like, hey, this is a great place. I recognize you are first, in your industry here. If you ever have health concerns or want to just chat and get advice or give health advice, come to Wing Women, right? And then I
Mhm.
started to realize like there has to be another way that I can show people why this is valuable as opposed to
Mhm.
just trying to advertise a platform. And so that's when I started to write out multiple articles around what most would consider to be taboo topics
Right,
because the
right.
information is needed. But again, just based on my life experience, the women may not know where else to get it. And it just may not
Mhm.
be readily available. So I was like, all right, well, I'm
Mhm.
going to start writing about things that everybody wants to hear about, nobody wants to talk about, and see what happens.
Common
And
theme in our communities, definitely.
yeah, and so it's just taken off. Like seriously, it took off very quickly. And in terms of the reshares and the even with the PTSD article, because I was like, nobody's going to read this, you know, or not nobody
How
was going
many
to read it.
people? Because I
Well, I
bet so
didn't.
many.
It wasn't so much that it was nobody, but it was kind of like, is this too taboo? Do people really understand that women are more susceptible to having PTSD symptoms? Like, do they get this? And then the article, obviously, that you were featured in, like it picked up and got shared and spread very quickly. And so I was like, oh, so my suspicions were correct.
Yeah, and I bet you there's that about so many other topics. I think even like having something like that on your phone where you can privately read it
Mm-hmm.
without, anybody knowing what you're doing. And unfortunately, there's many people that approach these kind of bigger topics like PTSD, trauma, uh, from a very like isolating place. Like nobody should know that I went through this.
Yeah.
Nobody understands my experience. But then in reading stuff like this, they notice that there's so many of us that go through
Yeah.
stuff like this.
And it's interesting because, you hear all of these movement to like destigmatize things, like destigmatize PTSD, destigmatize mental health. And I'm like, I think you can do that without actually putting that in the headline of the
I know,
article,
right?
because to your point, if a woman is sitting there, and I'll just, I have my cell phone here, and she's got her phone, it needs to be destigmatized in the sense that it's in a mainstream platform, it's with names that she recognizes, and it's written in a way where the medical information or the health information is there, but it's not too jargon heavy, so that she can very easily identify or see where she might, be experiencing or having a similar life experience to whomever article's about, right? And so, I think it's just that, like, destigmatizing is just normalizing it, in that make it just like everything else and share it just like everything else. And hopefully the right women find it, and are, my responsibility is just to make sure that it's there.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
happy that people have liked that.
Right, right, absolutely. I also, as you're saying about destigmatizing, I wonder about this because I think it's like everybody wants to be in we are destigmatizing mental health, but I'm like, what are you really doing? Because
You're
even
throwing
with,
the word stigma in there, and I think that that's
yeah,
touchy.
yeah, as it is. And, I work with several people who are nervous to ask for a mental health day or to say, hey, I need to go to my therapist appointment. And, different industries are very, really embrace this, or they're like, very like, I don't need to know about your personal life.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that in 2020, I think there was this like magnifying glass on like mental health and the destigmatizing, but also what are the steps that you're taking to support people, women, versus just using the word because it's like cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think everybody last year, well, I don't want to say everybody. I would just say pandemic definitely revealed a lot, like, about the stage of mental health and how destigmatized it actually was at that point. Like, I remember at the very beginning of pandemic, people were just like day drinking all day
Oh, yeah.
long, and remember that part, and
Yeah.
baking everything they can find on Pinterest. But by month 5, the tone of those different posts changed dramatically. And then
Mhm.
even
It's
just
like we're
on my
still
part,
here.
yeah, pulling
Yeah.
those reports towards, no October, November, and seeing the true impact of the increase of visits to a doctor or mental health professional by women who obviously
Mhm.
participated in these surveys,
Mhm.
revealed that such a significant spike, I think as high as 83%. In one of the reports that I read, like, all that didn't just happen because of the pandemic. You know what I mean? I think it highlights the
100%.
fact that it was there before,
Yep.
and the pandemic revealed what the true number is, because people were finally in a position where they wanted to talk. And some of that
Mhm.
stigma of needing to tell a boss or a friend, like, I need a mental health day or whatever, like, went out the
Mhm.
window. They're like, hey, I'm about to save
You're like,
myself.
yeah, you're lucky I'm here. You're
Yeah,
lucky I
I'm like,
logged
I'm
on.
about
I'm
to
moving
save
the mouse.
myself. I don't, like you can care. I don't care what you think about me, but yeah, I'm about to take this mental health day, right? Like
Uh,
people just got more bold about protecting their bodies.
Very
I think that's
true.
really what happened last year. And,
Mhm.
quite frankly, what I think we'll continue to see moving forward.
I really hope so because I do, I have had a few friends, even, people that I work with that have started going back into the office,
Mhm.
um, not by their choice.
Yeah.
So I wish there was more flexibility, but also I think it depends on the industry too. Some industries are like, yes, you work from home, come in whenever you feel like it. Others are
Yeah.
like, we need you here now.
Yeah.
So I think it depends on the industry, but I really do hope that people do still uh, like pay attention to what their body's saying. I feel like our bodies give us all the answers when we're feeling that, like feeling like sucker punched, or when we're
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
like some tension, like even like the little cold sweat. Like these are all indicators. Like pay attention to me. Something is not okay,
Mhm.
and I
I
hope that
think
that
so
happens
too.
more.
I think and it's a mix of things, right? I don't think it's any one thing, but whether it's about mental health, overall wellness, and even just seeing the varied opinions that I read on social media around, do you get the vaccine? Do you not get the vaccine? Which vax should you get? What is
Hmm.
the long-term impact of the vaccinations, whether, it's Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson and Johnson? I think the bigger thing that is going to come out of this is kind of like a body autonomy movement. Like people are going to start paying attention to their bodies. And I think that they're going to start to protect whatever their true belief is around how they're supposed to care for themselves.
Hmm.
What is that book? I think it's called The Body Keeps Score.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whereas before we would have been very dismissive of sweating or a migraine that pops up when you're in certain environments.
Yeah, it's like it is what it is. This is how I am, right? That was
Yeah.
like the
And then
excuse. This is
I
how I
think
am.
now people are going to start paying attention like, I get this same migraine whenever I walk into this office and I have these stressors
Hmm.
and, I've eaten this for breakfast that morning. Like, I think people are going to start to listen to what
Hmm.
their body is telling them and then start to look for ways to ease whatever their stress levels are. And just take better care of themselves by, like I said,
Yeah.
just listening to the rhythm of their body and what it
Hmm.
does and does not want.
Yes, especially what it does not want, and
Mhm,
embracing that. Like, I share a lot about like trusting your gut instinct. Like,
mhm.
again, you have the answers, and it's about finding it. Like sometimes we have to maneuver around a little to find that answer, but
Yeah,
usually, like the answers are within you. You know the answers, you have the tools. It's just about bringing it up to the surface and remembering to use it.
it's so funny you say that because so I have a 4-year-old, right? And I mean,
Hmm.
he's 4 now, but he's my youngest of the 3. And what's really interesting when I watch him is like children really lean into their intuition. They're just, I mean, I'm not saying it's always right. He'll just
Like,
run
I
and he
want that chocolate bar.
tosses caution to the wind, or if he intuitively knows that whatever I'm asking him to do or somebody else is telling him to do doesn't lead to his desired outcome, like he does the opposite, right? And so those
Hmm.
behaviors that arise in children, like they're learning to test limits. And of course, we would assign different terms to it. But I do think um, when we become adults, listening to that inner gut feeling around like what to eat, what not to eat, what behaviors are positive versus others that are basically self sabotaging. And we're just like unconsciously just like on a loop. Like, I kind of feel like I should stop doing that, but I've always done it this way. And
Just keep on going.
I'm just keep doing it. You know what I mean? Whereas I think, like I said before, we get into these locked in behaviors and locked in patterns, we
Mhm.
don't pay attention to that little gut feeling that might be encouraging us to maybe live life a little differently. So intuition is
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah, it's like that's like a lesson to take with us into adulthood of being okay with being like a little silly or just
Yeah.
noticing and taking risks.
Yeah.
Again, I do have to acknowledge, like I think like when we're adults, then we start paying attention to anxiety and is this what I've been living with? And that's what stops us to be those
Yeah.
risk takers that maybe we were when we were younger.
Well, I know for the example for in terms of my own personal experience with the anxiety, like um, before I would be like, oh, I knew I had this anxious feeling when I was around certain people or in certain environments and stuff like that. And I just
Mhm.
never thought it was more than that. But, with anxiety, as with stress and many other things, if you keep doing that to your body, like, um, the problem can become progressively worse. And so no longer is it
Mhm.
just anxiety, then it turns in, or it can manifest into anxiety attacks or
Yeah.
unwanted um, things that happen psychologically, emotionally, physically within your person, like, you get goosebumps or whatever.
Paralyzing. Mhm.
Yeah, if you don't
Mhm.
listen to that, and oftentimes the body has little mechanisms that kick in and trigger our brain, like like kind of telling us like, hey, listen to me.
Like, you're not gonna do
You
something, now
might
you're
not
gonna
want to keep
freeze.
doing that, like,
I know, right?
hey, that person may not be healthy for you. Hey, don't eat that much red meat. You know what I mean? Like these little things, and you just write it off. And
Yeah.
as an adult, you just become far more aware, like, oh my God, this gives me anxiety. You know what I mean? And then you start to kind of
Mhm.
unpack, well, why? But
Where that comes from, yeah,
mhm,
yeah.
so it's good.
So I'm hearing, all of these things that, we're talking about, but I kind of want to go back a little bit to even like being like the only woman in the room, like you said, like the only woman like on the board of things or whatnot. What like what pushed you to still keep going? Because I will say, like for myself, sometimes these kind of spaces make me nervous.
Yeah.
It's anxiety. You feel like that. I always picture it as like this, like kind of like something that's building in my stomach and it's kind of like rising into my chest. And it
Yeah.
kind of like takes over, right? Of like,
Yeah.
well, I have to do it and I don't want to, but here I am.
um I think for me personally, like, I guess actually it's still the same. I stopped looking at things as like, oh, well, if I do it, I'm going to be the only this, I'm going to be the only woman, I'm going to be the only Black woman, I'm going to be the only millennial. I had to kind of
Mhm,
remove that lens because those factors aside, something in my gut, something in my heart, something in my spirit is just like, I belong there. I think
mhm,
naturally when we're all born, and whether or not you're religious, I do believe that people have a destiny and they very much have a lifetime to achieve certain things, and certain things have your name written on them. And so
mhm,
because I am to believe that, the other factors, my race, gender, economic status, family type, all of that were all considered when the information or the nudge came to me, like, oh girl, you should probably be on that board, or maybe you should go write that book, or you should go get on that stage.
mhm,
Those moments that come to push you and tell you like, this is actually a stop on your destiny, on your journey of life.
yeah.
And it was factored
Mhm,
in, when you were born. I allowed that
mhm,
to be more of a guiding light for me, and less to do with some of the other factors. Although I will say, um, it did in some cases create a really unique life experience, because getting to the table and acknowledging the call is one thing, but staying in the room when you're the only woman at the table,
this is true.
that is a different skill set.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
so it's been something that I've again taken a lot of life experience from and rolled into my
Mhm,
company and to what I'm doing now. But it's certainly not something that I think that should keep me from the table. But now
mhm.
I'm just way more mindful about my game plan as I'm walking down the hall to said table
Yeah.
before
I'm
I
like,
take
I'm
my
literally
seat. Like, okay,
visualizing
so
you.
I'm going to get to the table. Well, first, I'm going to get to the room. I'm going to tell them why I belong there. They're going to eventually relent and give me a seat. And then I'm going to sit there, and they're probably not all going to agree with me. But when they don't agree with me, like, what's my plan? And honestly, that's self-care. But um, yeah, I've just really allowed the things that I know that I'm called to do to be my governing factor with whatever I pursue.
Mhm, mhm. Has there been moments where people have said, no, you don't belong here,
Yes.
or it's not a space for you.
Absolutely, and I think in some cases, that is it can be very, very factual information.
Mm,
I know
mhm.
that there's like tons of quotes that have gone viral about like, and they told me no, and I did it anyway. And while I while
Feel
I
like I'm
love
watching them, yes.
while I love that, I think sometimes um, what's lost when people tell us that an opportunity or something may not be for us is some of the fine print, which is fear on behalf of that person. And sometimes that's what it is. It's also like
Mhm,
this environment isn't structured for you, and something that could be really stressful, more difficult, traumatic, even could result if you enter into this space that is not yet set up for you. Nothing
mhm,
personal, just what you stand to lose is less than what you stand to gain if you barrel your way to the table and take a seat.
mhm.
But then there's the other part, and I think it's something that I've had to navigate honestly as a woman, and will continue to. And that's whether or not I had the skill set in some cases to realistically get to whatever the opportunity was and to stay in it. And I think that's been the harder part to navigate, because nobody wants to admit where they have shortcomings,
Yeah, it's
despite
looking
being
back on yourself. Yeah.
yeah, despite being ambitious and
Mhm,
tenacious and I'm going to rule the world.
mhm,
Sometimes it's not a matter of if, but when. And so that last
mhm.
factor in terms of maturity and timing, I think also really plays into that. But I'm smarter now. I'm not going to just
Mhm.
barrel into certain things that I would have done like 10 years ago. But it doesn't
You
mean I'm
know,
still not going to pursue it, just maybe not at that time.
as you're saying this, and I appreciate you sharing what you just shared, because as you're saying this, I'm kind of reflecting back on an experience that kind of came to mind. And so I was living in New York City for 3 years and moved back to LA area to California in December of 2019. And during the time in like my last year in New York, I was like, I'm done with New York. I love it, but also I got to go back to LA. I'm ready. I was so ready. And so I started looking for new opportunities. I decided that I didn't actually the work that I was doing, it was kind of like a bit mundane. I kind of felt like I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm not learning much here. I need to do more. I need to expand, And so, and then on the other end, they're also like, you have to be in New York State to be able to work for the company. So I'm like, I
Mm,
think this is just meant to be. I got to go, right? So it's
yeah.
perfect. And so I started interviewing for different places, and I had this interview with this company. It was like a startup doing mental health, kind of more like case management stuff, and went pretty far along in the process. And I was like, oh, I got this. This is gonna be perfect. I'm gonna be able to live in LA, and it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
And then when the rejection came, it
Mhm.
was they said something like that my skills didn't align, and something like it was something like it and as I think about it now, it was like, you're not good enough for this role, or
Yeah.
your skills, ultimately for me, I read it as you're not good enough.
Mhm.
And I remember being so sad about, like, is
Yeah.
it that I'm a woman of color? Is it that um I am not this enough or that enough, or whatever it may be.
Mhm.
And so it totally made me question, like, my 9+ years at the time of experience in the mental health field.
Mhm.
And so then I actually ended up coming back to LA, and expanding my private practice. I was just doing it part time at the time. Now I
Mhm.
have a group practice with 5 people that I
Mhm.
work with me. And that company reached out to me like maybe like 2 months ago.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
I am serious. And like,
Wow.
yeah, they reached out to me and they're like, oh, like, we see you're doing great things. Learn more, like more about us, blah, blah. And I actually replied because it was the co-founder of the company that emailed me. And
Mhm.
I was like, do you remember that we actually already talked about this? I think he forgot. I don't know how it happened. And then he's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I do remember you. And I see your practice and you're doing so well. And you should really consider, this and that. And I'm like, no. Like,
Yeah.
it kind of felt good to say no, but also I do wonder, like, maybe I didn't have the skill sets that they needed. And it wasn't that I'm not good enough, but maybe at the time the leadership that they needed, you know, kind of like what you're saying about recognizing your shortcomings.
Yeah. It's
Maybe it
I
just
think
wasn't for me.
it's shortcomings, but it's also
Mm,
a little bit of too is environment. And with startups, they have different phases. And so the people that they have on their team when they're pre-seed phase versus seed versus a growth phase, those could all be very different people. You know, in
mhm,
the same way they may swap teams, they may swap advisors. And so I would say in that kind of a, you know, situation, it could be any number of things, but I'd also say startups and tech, like they're really, really unique environments. And to your point, like it could just be a matter of timing. And so
mhm,
I
mhm.
tell you, it's like sometimes as a Black woman, you know, that does cross my mind, like just because I'm Black, you know what I mean? Like,
Honestly, I was like, everybody looks white. Is it because
yeah.
I'm like, I'm
And
a
I could see
Latina?
that, but I feel like maturity has taught me that you know, there could be, you know, biases around race and whatnot that take place. But I also have just leaned more into giving people the benefit of the doubt. Like there could be something about that working environment or that team or whatever their immediate goals are that either I'm not the right fit, they can't afford my skill set, or it's a yes, but not right now.
Mhm,
Or
mhm.
life, God, universe, or whatever has me on a different path. And this person
Right.
is just on that path to say, hey, go this way. You know what I mean? And so in
Mhm.
your case, it sounds like you ended up probably out any better because think about
Honestly,
it, you know,
yes, I agree.
if they circled back around, whoever they hired may not have worked out. And what
Mhm.
if you were that guinea pig? You'd be out of
Yeah,
a job right now and you wouldn't have your practice. And
yeah.
so um, I've started to just acknowledge these little synchronicities in life where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe, you know, this didn't work out or that. And then later seeing like,
Mhm.
oh, I actually got
Actually, it
something
did
way
work
better.
out.
I got something way better,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, and
So
yeah, and I'm very big on that. Like, I'm very big on like coincidences do not happen. I think that everything is planned, meant to be, and it really helps me cope with things. Like if something
yeah,
happens, like if doesn't something doesn't work out, like, well, you know what? It wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to work out because something else
yeah,
is coming, and usually something else does, which
yeah.
is really great.
I've started to do that too because before I would lose days, weeks, months being like stuck on like I don't understand and like looking for answers. But then when your energy is caught up in trying to like pull it apart, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm,
you can't
mhm,
move forward.
mhm.
I think my mantra now is like you can get even or you can get ahead. So
Ah,
getting
I like
even
that.
in terms of trying to figure out the whys when I can use that same energy into
Mhm,
what you did, go and build an
mhm,
entire practice with five other souls that are in alignment with what you're trying to do, have shared
mhm,
belief systems, like-minded. That sounds like a
mhm.
much healthier plan, one that's far more stable because you have your own company, and
Right,
one that
right.
obviously sets you up for having a legacy and long-term professional success without
Mhm,
somebody else needing to hire you. So
mhm,
you still
mhm.
won, you know?
I know, right? I love
Yeah.
that you said legacy. So I have an Instagram for the podcast, and
Mhm,
today I put up a post. Usually, like on certain Fridays, I'll put like a picture and just like a something, whatever's coming to me, whatever I'm thinking.
mhm,
And today I asked a question. I was like, "What is your why?"
mm.
And I actually put on there. I was like, for me, it's being able to have like a legacy, and it goes beyond just like legacy, but also generational wealth
Yeah.
and
See,
being,
same.
you know what I
This
mean?
was
Like,
meant to happen.
right? I'm serious. Because like, and entrepreneurship and home ownership, which feels so unrealistic, but I see it and it's attainable. And like, so just thinking about legacy, like this is part of my why, like being able to show like my nieces and nephews, but not only family, other people in the world, that like there's so many opportunities and so many options, even when it may feel that there is none.
Yeah. And honestly, you know, I mean, same to what you're saying. Like for me, like I didn't grow up with a bunch of family members that own property. There were no active
Mhm.
conversations around what is our family legacy. I feel like whenever you see those TV shows where it's like an upper class family, and they're like, they've got a family crest and all of this stuff. Like, we've got to
Oh
protect
my
our
God, that's true.
legacy.
That's
It's
true.
like you have this clear thing in your head where, okay, well, if I didn't grow up with that, then clearly having a legacy doesn't actually apply to me. But
Hmm.
then you get older, and I think for me, I see that more in alignment with like entrepreneurship, because the world opens up and all of a sudden legacy and generational wealth and opportunity doesn't have to look a certain way. You figure out that you could actually create it and make it for yourself, which
Yep.
I find to be far more validating and
Yep.
exciting anyway. It's like, oh, if I can do this and if I have total agency in myself, then I already know I'm going to win. So there's a
Yep.
certain level of confidence, like, oh, well, I make stuff happen all day anyway. So
Yep.
I guess I'm going to have a legacy too.
Let's make our crest. We got to make our own crest.
Yeah. I'm like, they thought that crests were just for them, and, I'm on Etsy. Like, I'm pretty sure they didn't go on Etsy to have a crest made, but I mean, everybody
Hey,
starts somewhere, right?
we
Uh,
can.
yeah.
I
But
love that.
I love that, that you are so mindful about what that looks like for your nieces and nephews and for people that you know. And
Hmm.
honestly, I mean, I have found so much just by being in alignment and knowing what my why is and just being straight up with people.
Hmm.
I've started to attract way more people into my personal and professional sphere that weren't there before.
Hmm.
And I have random people like reaching out, like, thank you for doing this. This is
That's amazing.
inspiring,
Yeah.
and then that legacy brings everybody, or your decision to have a legacy and to own up to your why brings in so many other souls and hearts too. So
Hmm.
it's just a really good
Hmm.
feeling.
I agree. I agree. And I love just what you said. Like this was like even our conversation today and connecting over social media. I think it was meant to be because having this conversation, bringing it to light, I think like is so beautiful. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that and appreciate you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I'm like, just on my part, I'm like, I'm going to write an article about, what professional women should know about PTSD. And I was very intentional about that because if you just put women, people don't think it will apply to them. So I'm like, this is for you professional ladies, made it extra special, but then to reach out and to find somebody that's an expert in the field and can
Mhm,
speak to it in a way that just as the author of the piece,
mhm,
yes, I can drive a point home, but having an expert and having somebody else um, second, the information that's in the
mhm,
article, provide an additional layer of understanding to women, I think is so powerful, right? Because
mhm, mhm,
in the social media exchange that we had on Instagram and then later via email,
mhm.
I mean, there's a ripple effect. There's women that are going to
Yeah,
read that, even if privately on their phone, and perhaps either seek help or understand more deeply what they could be experiencing or just feel seen,
right.
acknowledged,
Exactly. Feel
worthy.
seen.
So,
Yeah.
thank you for that because we kind of co-created that opportunity or that experience for anybody who read it and who really, really found resonance with its words and its content.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So you mentioned self-care earlier. So what are some of your self-care tips or routines
Oh,
that
geez.
help you? You said you have a mom of three, so
Yeah.
what kind of self-care helps you?
Well, to be honest with you, like my
Mm-hmm.
self-care ranges depending upon my stress level. I'm far more intentional now. So as before I'd be like, I'm just going to do yoga or I'm just going to journal. Like I'll do those things depending upon if my stress level is on the lower side. Because if it's on the lower side, yeah, just going to a yoga class, totally enough to knock it out. But for example, having a startup when I'm out actively talking to investors or actively pitching, obviously with a higher stress level, that's not always enough.
Right,
Um, so for
right.
me, it ranges from everything between yoga, meditation, prayer, going to 24-hour fitness to um, eating cleaner, like completely pulling alcohol, caffeine, red
Mm-hmm.
meat, anything from my diet at times that's going to make me feel
Ah,
more jittery or exacerbate my anxiety levels. And alcohol and caffeine, and honestly, for me at least, red meat tend
I
to
see.
trigger that. So
Yeah,
that's a
yeah.
level of self-care. And then in other times, particularly with having series of intense conversations as it relates to fundraising for a startup. And, startups are still very heavily male dominated field.
Uh-huh. You're
You know,
stepping in there. Yes.
yeah, but working with a counselor or a therapist. And so that way, instead of me sitting around at night stewing and, just being a ball of stress, it's like having somebody to go to,
Mhm.
telling them what happened, and then having somebody else, and I don't want to say to bounce ideas off of, but to share what happened, allow them to digest it, show me the room from a different vantage point, and give
Mhm.
me learning pieces. And so instead of me losing sight of my own balance and equilibrium by being stressed out and being angry and feeling like I'm not good enough and staying in those emotions,
Right.
shifting out of it very quickly. And so, regularly being able to say, hey, you know what? This is heavy. Let me
Mhm.
get on the phone with my therapist, or let me go to a group counseling session with other like-minded individuals. That is
Mhm.
definitely a level of self-care that has helped keep
Oh
me
yeah.
far more grounded.
Mhm.
Um, and just doing it regularly, you end up running to other people who are doing it the same, and or doing it in the same way. Uh, and that in and of itself, I think also kind of makes it feel super normal. Like, yeah, well, we're all in high stress fields. This is
Yep.
completely normal because dealing with this much stress isn't typical for most people.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And just being able to bounce ideas and like learn a little bit, like not only with a therapist, but even with other people that, like you said, like-minded people. Because
mhm.
I think that's really, really important. Like sometimes I find myself like spiraling on little things, and then I'll talk it out with like somebody, like one of my best friends, for example, who, it's weird, but a lot of at least all of my friends are all therapists. So,
Okay.
so I'll like share like, okay, this happened or that happened. What do you think? And then they'll like repeat it back to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, wait,
Yeah.
I knew I was on the right track. or
Yeah.
or
But
just talking
it's
it
so
out.
helpful, right? And then when you can shift out of that little spiral moment, and I know exactly what you mean, because I will overthink the death out of things. Like, it will just be a general social interaction, and then I'll be like 2 hours later while I'm like cooking, like, wait a minute, was I too short with her, or was she too short with me? What was I
Yep.
doing when we were talking? Did
Yep.
I, come across a certain way? And then like I will be
Did she
like,
get what I meant?
and
That's
then I'm
one
like,
that
do
I
I
get
write
hung
an
up on.
email? Do I follow up and apologize? And
Mhm.
like, I've found myself in those little spirals, and then I will like create some action without talking to anybody. Like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just fix it. I'll call and apologize. And halfway through the apology, she's like, and this is just an imaginary she, like, what are you apologizing for? And so,
That's happened to me.
yeah. Like,
I
so
actually
instead of,
called a friend and I was like,
so
I'm sorry that I said that. She's like,
yeah. And then
what are
it's
you
like,
talking about?
no, they did not experience that moment nearly as bad as it appeared in your head. And so,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
just having somebody to do it. Not all of my friends are therapists. I have friends from all backgrounds, but somebody outside of myself, and somebody I think who would be more qualified. Like, as I've extended in my career, I've gotten away from telling like close friends things, because not that they're not interested, but they just may not be equipped to help me see things effectively if they're not professionally trained,
Right.
for example, or have had similar work experiences to pull from.
Right.
So,
Yeah, definitely like certain friends, I think like help in certain areas. So I've
mm,
definitely learned that also throughout the years. And of course, my own therapy, like that's always extremely helpful.
yeah, it's so funny. Like, before I started to go to therapy, I was like, "Ah, like, what is this going to look like? My ancestors are going to be rolling in the graves. You know what I mean? Like, I was listening to, I won't reveal who it was, but just somebody close to me. And they were just like, Black people got through slavery without therapy. And I'm just like, that is troubling that you would say that. But then
Mhm.
if that's the bar, that because you come from a cultural group that has already been otherized, excuse me, and has had already experienced massive levels of trauma and traumatic life experiences, and
Mm-hmm.
they did it without the use of therapy. Like, that doesn't mean we should still keep using that method. Like, there are
Right.
other ways to deal with it. And just because people manage these large, exorbitant amount of stress and difficulty doesn't mean that that was right for them. And it doesn't mean that they deserved it.
And
Uh,
also, what did manage even look like? Because that's where the
yeah.
generational trauma is created. Because
Yeah. And
these situations that there was lack of resources, no opportunities. And so
exactly.
this is
But
just
then
how we are,
even looking
keeps
at
on
it
going.
to that critical point, like, was it done that way because they wanted to do it that way, or because my aunt or my mom or my cousin or my friend, like, is the advice they're giving to me because
Mm-hmm.
they had all available resources at their disposal? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
um, you
Very
know what I
true.
mean? But the beauty about growth in my own life experience is that I do have certain resources at my disposal, whereas perhaps other family members, other people that I know didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So, given that that level of privilege is there for me, I should 100% lean into them.
Yep.
Um, and like what I was going to say earlier is, like, as I started to go and really lean on these, I started to talk to other girlfriends. And then I would find out that people that I never even suspected in my friend circle were all going to therapy too for very similar things. Like, to
Mm-hmm.
have somebody else help you unpack something that either you don't have the skill set to see from a different vantage point,
Mm-hmm.
give you some different strategies on how to manage it
Mm-hmm.
that won't hurt your name, your career, yourself, your own
Right.
health
Right. Right.
long
Right.
term. They give you some other ways to approach situations, instead of like just trying to figure it out for yourself, or, like I mentioned earlier, going to people who are not skilled, or
Mm-hmm.
equipped to tell you what to do and how to manage those situations. So,
Mm-hmm. So many different things. I mean, all makes perfect sense. And I share this a lot with people that even me being a therapist, my family's like, that's great, good for you, but not for me. Not for
yeah,
me. And I'm like, what? And
yeah,
then, but then they'll call me like, oh, what do you think I should do in this situation, in that situation? But still,
yeah.
it ain't for me though. So
It's
it's
interesting.
tough to break through.
It's tough to break through. I think it's tough, or there's a unique toughness if you're a person of color, because there's so many different built-in beliefs around what therapy
Hmm.
looks like, and then just social
Hmm.
beliefs. Black community is like, you don't go putting your business in the street, you know what I mean? Like, you don't go
Same.
sharing family information, and
Hmm. Family secrets is a big one.
you know what I mean? And
You don't
so I
tell.
could
Hmm.
understand why, yeah, of course we don't want to share the family secret, but
Honor the crest.
yes, but then you have to figure out where, um, that strategy really gives you any benefit in terms of how you're
Hmm.
able to process things and how you're able to move through them. And if you find that by holding on to those beliefs that are shared by other family members of not sharing, if you think that that's going to lead to your own health, go for it. I think in my case, though, I'm like, I'm seeing patterns in the way we've always dealt with things. I'm seeing them arise in my own behavior. I
Hmm.
can see a little bit
Yep.
about why it's happening, and I don't want to do this. So I'm going to go get some other strategies from a therapist. And
Yeah.
I don't think that that has anything to do with putting business out there as much as it's recognizing that there's some patterns or things that are happening, and you see how they result, and
Right.
you don't want that to happen to you either. And,
Right.
I see it as being,
100%.
more self-loving and self-protecting. And I know that that makes people feel weird, that like you wouldn't put others before yourself, but I mean, you need to be able to put your own oxygen mask before you can save yourself, or
I was
before you
just
can
thinking
save other
about that.
people.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
agree. Well, I have enjoyed this conversation so, so much. Where can people find you to learn more about you, to read about your articles,
Yeah.
to
So,
learn about your company?
I'm trying to think. The best way is probably my Instagram. It's
Uh-huh.
Adonica Shaw. That's ADONICASHAW.
Hmm.
I regularly post, just screen grabs of the articles. And then if there's something that's up that moment or that day, like, the link will be up in the profile.
Got it.
Also
Okay.
LinkedIn, but I recognize LinkedIn isn't everybody's jam. Um,
Mhm.
but my Instagram feed is like a little bit of a mix of business and writing and just me just being a millennial lady having fun and
Yes.
experiencing new things. Like it's more of a mix of things. But if they're looking to connect with me for any professional opportunities and whatnot, it's my website, which is adonicashaw.com. And
Got
there's
it.
a contact form there that they can fill out if they need me to speak about anything or
Mhm.
set up an interview, that kind of a thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Adonica, thank you for being here. It was such a great conversation. Like I loved how it flowed. And like I said, I feel like this is all like meant to happen. So I so appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited that your audience gets to hear this exchange. And
Yeah.
that's just great that the synchronicities lined up and
I
we
know,
were able
right?
to make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for watching or listening. You can find this on Apple Podcasts, on iHeartRadio. Where else am I? I always forget all these things. Spotify, YouTube. You'll be able to put a face to the name on YouTube, so check us out. And thank you again for being here. And I look forward to the next time. All right. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.